You know, I le- you know, I can understand some people feeling that since it's been 5 years and pretty much the story arc was based on an old continuity and really doesn't have anything to do with the new continuity, I figured, you know what, I'm still going to talk about it. But I'm going to talk about it in a way that kind of, I guess you can say, was inspired by Louis, Lovehog's Linkara, A History of Power Rangers. In case you don't know, Linkara has kind of re-edited them, refilmed them, and basically revoiced them narratively so it can be more up to date. And it got me thinking, talked about some things that he didn't get to talk about originally when he did the History of Power Rangers back in 2009, 2010, and so on. So I figured I'd take a whack at it. But I'm not talking Power Rangers, I'm talking the Mecha Sally arc. Now, we all pretty much know and kind of will agree on the fact that when we got I wouldn't say the final cover for 225, but more along the lines of the covers, the ink variants of 225's cover, and we saw the hand laying on the ground, we pretty much knew who that was. Which had a clue as to who that could be. And lo and behold, we weren't disappointed. Especially even after they gave us the solicits for 225, it wasn't no surprise, really, to any of us as to exactly who it was going to be that was going to be killed off, if you will. And I put quotations in killed off, all around killed off, because pretty much if you read 225 and then you read the Sonic Genesis arc that followed as a part of it, and then you read the follow-up, which was 230, then you pretty much know the killed off portion was null and void. And the character that was supposedly killed off was Princess Sally. Now, basically, this was kind of a victory, a tragic victory, if you will, in a sense, Sonic, if you will, because not only did, if you read Sonic Genesis, and this is a bit of spoilers, not only did he kind of help restore time, or basically reverse time to moments before she gets gunned down, and basically save her, and save her life from being, as Ian Flynn puts it, saves her from being turned into Swiss cheese thanks to Eggman's torrent on the Death Egg, or torrent gun on the Death Egg. You can look at that as a bit of a victory because, one, he restored time, prevented Eggman from wiping out everything, and rebuilding it in his own world, basically trying to wipe out certain things like the beam, which was an alien race in the old continuity, that basically restored every roboticized character back to normal, except for Sonic's dad. The reason for Sonic's dad not being restored was, according to the beam, was due to the fact that he was so severely wounded in what was known as the Great War that even if he was restored, he wouldn't survive that much longer. So anyway, the beam restoring all the roboticized Mobians, as they were called, I guess it's still called, back to normal, and thus making them immune to roboticization, which was part of Eggman's scheme here to reset the world, rewrite the world in his image, thus nullifying the effect that the beam had, thus erasing the immunists, if you will, that the Mobians had, so that now everybody, even those that weren't roboticized, everybody could now be roboticized. So how does this play into Sally's situation? Well, basically, as I've mentioned before and many others have mentioned, Sonic was off dealing with Robotnik's hordes, if you will, his horde commanders like Silver Sonic and Metal Sonic. And this opened the door for Sally to go into the center of the Death Egg and locate, along with Nicole, locate the global roboticizer. Because basically, long story short, Eggman had created a global roboticizer to basically be activated from the Death Egg once he rewrote reality, and basically would allow him to roboticize the entire planet and everyone on it. So to prevent this from happening, Sally basically has Nicole avert the beam in her direction, basically right on her. And a lot of people have debated this because they're like, well, wait a minute, she could have had to avert it to the side and had the beam just blast off into the air and that's it. But no, Sally basically, according to the story, had Nicole avert the beam to directly be on her location because that was the only, the best shot that they had. And the end result, even though Nicole, from a storyline standpoint, tried to talk her out of it, Sally basically took her second chance at life, as she mentioned, and gave it back by allowing herself to be roboticized into Mecha Sally. Now, that sounds good and everything to some, like I was saying, to some people, and I'm pretty sure Ian Flynn looked at it this way, that her being roboticized, kind of sacrificing herself, was a good change of pace because no one saw it coming. When you looked at the cover for 230, a lot of theories came around. Even I added to the theory list of what, that cover's symbolism meant, for the story. Was Sally going to merge with Nicole? Fuse with Nicole? Was Sally going to go super? What was going to happen? And a lot of theories went out there, and those theories were kind of dashed when 231's cover was kind of revealed with a question mark. But pretty much that question mark already gave us the answer, like that's out, gave us, and I'm sure a lot of other fans, the answer by saying that that's Sally roboticized. And lo and behold, we were right. Lo and behold, a lot of us fans were correct about the fact that 231's cover that had a silhouette of a character with a question mark on the front of it was indeed a roboticized Sally. Now, here's the thing. We all know how the arc ended, and the arc originally ended with 247. Now, what's funny about this is the arc kept going on, not kept going on, but the arc lasted, believe it or not, for about 17 months. Now, that's not necessarily true. You see, 231 was, in my opinion, the official beginning of it because that was the first full issue we saw of Sally roboticized. And it ran from 231 to 247. Now, you might say that's 16 issues. That's a year and 4 months. That's almost a year and a half. And that's true. However, it's actually a year and 5 months. Let me explain. You see, when you look at the background, you look at the history of it, 242 was not really was, I guess you could say, tossed out of continuity or tossed out of circulation by the fans. Even though a lot of us have 242, a lot of us basically read it but put it to the side and kind of took it out of the circulation of the Mecha Sally continuity. The reason being is because 242 was nothing more than a late month, and I mean very late by a few months, tie-in to the 2012 Olympic Games and the 2012 Mario and Sonic Olympic game. That's all it was. And the only connection that we had to the Mecha Sally arc was the backup story, and that was it. Most of the story was dedicated to that Olympic tie-in. And then when you look on the Sonic Universe side of things, the same can be said there, because yes, the Mecha Sally arc became part of that as well. You had the Eggman Scramble deal, where a lot of the egg bosses, including Bunny's uncle, who was an egg boss, his name was Beauregard, saw Mecha Sally for the first time and couldn't believe what they were seeing. So basically, count possibly the 4 issues of Eggman Scrambled, along with the 15 issues of the main comic. That being 4 issues of Universe, 15 of the main comic, looking at almost 19 to 20 issues worth of story. So you're almost close when you combine, like I say, the 4 issues of Sonic Universe, and maybe several others that dealt with it as well as the 15 issues of the main comic that were truly dedicated to it. Look back at that history, you almost have 2 years of story in the span of a year and a half when you combine both comic books together. Now, when one looks back at this, many can say that it was probably the best work Ian Flynn has done. Some can say it was probably the worst work he's ever done. And then a lot of people just look at it now and just think, what was the point? Looking back at its history and what it was, and what people like Ben Bates and Ian Flynn and people that worked on the arc, on the Mecha Sally arc, have said and basically reported of what it would have been and what the result of Sally being restored into the new redesign that she has now would have come from. Looking back on it, a lot of people, like I said, you got a lot of people that liked it, some that didn't, but then you got a lot of people that like, what was the point? Yes, it's 5 years later, but when you think about it, arc ended when? Right? When did it end? It ended in 247 with us going into another Genesis Wave story, which actually was the first Sonic Mega Man crossover. With that being the first Sonic Mega Man crossover that 247 Evans Genesis Wave led us into, but we were left with a cliffhanger. Like, okay, what's going to happen? And we wouldn't find out until 252, which basically, when one thinks about it, 231 to 241 or 243 was around November of that year, November 2012, right? Something like that. And 242 was, I think, in December or something like around that time frame. But basically, like I said, when you look at late 2000, hold on. So basically, when 252 came out on September 4th, 2013, basically you had 251 in August of that year, 250 in July, 249 in June, and 248 in May. So basically, when you look at April 2013, that's when the Mecha Sally arc came to an end. And then it was in September of that year that pretty much we got what was known as the soft retcon and reboot. But, like I was saying, take that near, 15 issue run, you combine it with some of the issues it also was a part of in Sonic Universe, and you got almost 2 years there. But I think again, like I said, I think what some of the fans that look at it and think it was Ian's greatest work that he's done, I think the reason a lot of fans look at it when you look back at the history is it was a refreshing take on the comic. Basically, you had the heroes like Sonic, like Amy, like like Amy, like Sonic, like Amy, like Tails, Bunny, Antoine, Rotor, Nicole, Cream. You had all the heroes, even Sally in a way, even in her roboticized form, on the ropes. Basically, they were on the ropes and heading towards a rebuilding stage. Basically on the ropes, and according to Ian Flynn, the original plan was to put them so far down that when we got to a certain issue, they were going to start to build themselves back up. Basically Ian Flynn had planned a rebuilding process for the characters. And as great as that sounds, the one thing that a lot of the fans that liked this arc, like I said, because it felt refreshing, and that was the potential of the fact that it was going to help rebuild these characters and make them, I guess, more. I guess as Ian was originally intending, make these characters more likable in the eyes of the fans. This was a good move, and I'm not denying that it wasn't, because as I've said before, and I'll say again, I look back at the history of the Mecha Sally arc, and it's like it had the potential, but then it fell flat when it got like towards the middle, if not even before that. Now, for those that didn't like it, it was the fact that why do this? Why take a character like Sally or any character and go this direction? Why couldn't you come up with something different? That I think that was one of the main things. And it wasn't because these are Sally fans. I'm a Sally fan. I'm not going to deny that. But it wasn't because we were upset about what happened to Sally. It was more along the lines of why. Why couldn't it be, someone like Amy Rose? You can't tell me that Ian Flynn and Archie couldn't talk Sega into letting someone like an Amy Rose or Tails Miles Prower or Rouge the Bat or Shadow the Hedgehog or whatever, get roboticized for this arc instead of Sally. Or even someone like Bunny Rabbit. Or even Nicole somehow. Some character besides Sally. It's like, why couldn't they choose somebody else? Or why couldn't they go in a direction to where, like some theorize, Sally gets fused with Nicole, and now you're going to use this arc to try to find a way to separate them before they become one, and Sally and Nicole are lost to this new personality. I think that's the main question as to why. And when you look at it, when you look back at that history, those that liked it will pretty much argue the fact that, well, it's more tragic. Because the reason, looking back at the history of the arc itself, and even when you saw the seeds getting planted, the history can draw itself back all the way to the end of the Iron Dominion arc and building up to 222. Why? Because at the end of the Iron Dominion arc, Sally, she doesn't necessarily break up with Monkey Khan, or Ken Khan as he's called, but she basically kind of acknowledges that there is something there, but her heart still belongs to Sonic. And after that moment, she, Archie Comics, Ian Flynn, they slowly start building. You could see the relationship between Sally and Sonic back up until we get to 222, where they're officially a couple again. And some could say, when you look back at the history, that the seeds were planted, especially when 221 or 222 came out. We got the inked cover, or the ink preview of the 225 cover, and pretty much a lot of us knew who that was going to be. So a lot of people could say that the seeds were planted even way back then for something to happen. And and a lot of people that stood by Ian and liked what he did with this arc will argue the fact that because the seeds were kind of planted a lot earlier, like I said, even as far as the end of the Iron Dominion arc, it makes this situation with Sonic and the Freedom Fighters a lot more tragic, because now, especially for Sonic, because here's someone that he just rekindled his relationship with, his love for, and now he's fighting against her because she's an unwilling, roboticized, weaponized minion for Eggman. So it makes it more tragic and more powerful. And that's understandable, because a lot of comics will do that. Movies, comics, TV shows, animated shows, you name it, they will do that. It doesn't matter if it's DC, Marvel, IDW, Top Cow, it doesn't matter. Comic books will do that. And I think that's one of the general reasons, one of the main reasons we as fans of Sally and even of the Sonic Sally pairing were upset, is because here you have someone like Ian Flynn that's slowly building back up the relationship between Sonic and Sally, sort of igniting that fire once again. And yet he decides to snuff it out. Only, 3 issues in, 8 issues in? Of course you're going to get mad. Of course you're going to be upset because you're like, that's not the Sally we just saw. This is not the Sally we saw. And yes, they do confirm this in the final issue in issue 256, which is the final part, the final issue of the soft retcon reboot, soft rebooted pilot arc, Countdown to Chaos. So they do acknowledge that. But the thing is, I think that's one of the main reasons we were upset. The fact that you slowly built this relationship back up, and only after 3 issues, 8 issues, you snuff it out. It's like, what was... And I think that goes... And you look at that argument and as to why a lot of fans, like myself, were not happy about it, and that kind of lines itself into the fans that look at it and go like, what was the point? And these are the kind of fans that, probably liked it or didn't like it or were mixed about it, but now look at it 5 years later and they're like, okay, it's done, it's past, but still, when it's brought up, they even wonder what was the point. What was the point of putting Sonic and Sally back together if you were just going to snuff it out? What was the point of having Sally get roboticized and later on weaponized if all you were going to have was Sonic, Tails, and Amy repeating the same process issue after issue, going after her and trying to stop her and capture her and try to restore her and like rinse and repeat? What was the point? The fact that the Mecha Sally arc has this kind of a history behind it, it's one of those arcs that even though it's done and over with, you look back as a longtime fan, whether you're a longtime Sonic comic book fan, a longtime fan of Sonic overall, if you're a SatAM fan, it doesn't matter. You look back at that and you're like, what was the point of this arc even happening? Because then you find out some of the things that happened, because then you hear about what happened behind the scenes. Like I said, you see issues in the main comic and in Sonic Universe being interrupted for, game tie-ins and Olympic tie-ins. And it's like, what was the point of even doing this arc if you weren't going to get a satisfying conclusion? That's how a lot of people look at it now. And I think that's what really gets under a lot of people's goat, especially those that liked it, those that look at it and ask the question of what was the point, and those that didn't like it. Because what was planned originally, I think, could have saved the comic. Ben Bates comes out, and I think even Ian Flynn has come out, but mostly Ben Bates has come out and said that the issue, or at least the arc, was supposed to go as far as 250. And that by 250, Sally was going to be rescued and restored, and that's how she was going to get the redesign that she has now. And then after that, it was going to be a slow rebuilding process for the Freedom Fighters as characters and as a team to fight Eggman. And that sounds great. That sounds intriguing. That sounds like something that you want to read, you want to see, even if you get a redesign of the character, there's an explanation for it. But because of all this potential that could have been, that was lost and shelved permanently, that again, a lot of fans asked the question of what was the point. Even I asked the question of it, I think a long time ago, what was the point? Because if you're not going to give a satisfying conclusion, why do you even go this direction? It's like, why did you break? Because here's the thing too. There was a lot of questions that were never really answered. It's like Ian Flynn looked at some of the. It's like Ian Flynn, with all due respect, Ian Flynn didn't look at any of the past continuity when he made some of the decisions. And a lot of people, when you look at the history of the Mecha Sally arc, they're like, well, what was that about? Oh, why is he doing this? Doesn't he know about that? These were questions people were asking. It's like when Nagus removed the crystallization from Bunny. Bunny was accidentally crystallized when she was trying to help protect the city. And at the same time, when he removed the crystal from her, which would have restored her to normal, he did more than that. He ended up restoring her to flesh and blood. Like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, she's happy she's flesh and blood again, and as a reader, you're happy for her, but it's like, when you think about it, you're like, wait a minute. Didn't Bunny get an upgrade in a Sonic Super Special? Basically, now there was no chance of her being de-roboticized? That she was going to be half cyborg for the rest of her life? Like, what? Did that not, because you have fans going like, longtime fans that are like, did that not happen? Because if it did, then what the heck is Ian Flynn doing? By not going back on that. I mean, maybe he did acknowledge it in an issue or two. I think he did. But it's like they look at that and they're like, what was the point? What the heck was that about? Well, what the heck's going on? Basically, Ian Flynn made a continuity error in the eyes of a lot of fans. It's like Ian didn't pay attention to the continuity error that he made, and he just left it. Now, some could say, and I quote someone like Linkara, it's magic, you don't have to explain it. Well, guess what? For a lot of longtime fans that read the issues, read that Supersonic special, which was called Girls Rule, you do have to explain it. Especially for the longtime fans, and even the new fans that probably read that. Because they're thinking, well, wait a minute. I thought you had these new cybernetics that were not going to allow her to be flesh and blood again, and yet now she is. It's like, what's going on here? It's like a lot of questions were left unanswered. A lot of continuity mistakes were left unanswered. It's just, the history is just one that, it has its positives, it has its negatives, but all in all, it has some major errors to it. And I do agree with the fans looking back on it now. It's like, what was the point? It's like, it goes back to what I said before a long time ago, several years ago. It's like, what was the point if you weren't going to have a satisfying conclusion? And there were several questions. Heck, Jeffrey St. John being revealed as a minion or as a servant of Nagas. It's like, this came out of nowhere. True, they tried to give some kind of explanation to it, but there's a lot of us longtime fans, even newer fans that probably read the past comics. They're like, yeah, you're giving an explanation, respect you for it, but it's not a good one. Because when one looks at the Mecha Sally arc, and you look at these sudden continuity errors, these sudden continuity additions, it's like, what the fridge, to quote Animat, it's like, what the fridge are you doing? Like, do you not pay attention to previous works? And I'm sure this was at a time where the whole lawsuit behind the scenes with Ken Penders and Archie Comics was starting to build up, and maybe that's why Ian did what he did. Maybe so that he could stick it to Ken Penders and say, hey, up yours on some of your continuity stories, and anybody associated with you that wrote stories, I'm going to add in my own stuff. I'm going to do things, I'm going to rewrite certain things so that this doesn't happen, so that this happens and that happens, and I don't have to explain it because I'll make it magic or involve magic in it, and I don't have to explain it. It's like, really? You don't have to explain it. Then why even do it? Why even make the decision to do it if you're not going to explain it? And that is what really bugged people. I mean, the thing is, the truth about comic book arcs is, when you look back at the history of certain major arcs, whether from DC or Marvel or whoever, whether they were good story arcs or bad story arcs, you always get the question, when you look back at the history of them, there's always going to be those questions of what was the point of doing this, or why did they do this, or why did they do that, or didn't they pay attention to past continuity? Why are they changing this? Why did this happen? It's not supposed to happen. Several arcs out of Marvel and DC have had that, and a lot of people, and whether the arc was good, it was bad, mixed, a lot of people that liked it, didn't like it, will convene right in the middle with the people that look at it now and look at those arcs now and go like, what was the point? Because there are good arcs and there are bad arcs. There are good story arcs that have people asking what was the point of doing it in the first place if it's not going to have an effect on future stories. And that's the whole thing with the history of the Mecha Sally arc. It's like, why even do it in the first place if it's not going to have any real resonance, or any real effect, or any real effect or aftermath on the stories? I mean, you would think you have someone like Sally that was roboticized and kind of remembers now of that happening to her. You would think she'd want to confront Eggman down the line in the story. Maybe she will. Think even before then, even with the Shadow World arc, they would have her do something like that. But they didn't. Heck, you know what? You know what's really crazy? Really crazy, and yes, they're trying. And yes, they're trying their best to explain in the new continuity that memories of the old continuity are fading away. Another stick it to Ken Penders deal. But yet, you would think you would think they would kind of keep some remnants of the old world still there, because you have Sonic acknowledging it a few issues later, even after Countdown to Chaos is over. And yet you have Sally in the Spark of Life arc in Sonic Universe explaining to Big and Tails that she got her ring blades from Dr. LED, who was Nicole's creator, or accidental creator. And yet, a lot of fans know that's not true. Maybe in the new continuity it is, but everybody knows that's not really true. Everybody knows that she got her ring blades. The reason she has ring blades was due to the result that she was roboticized in the old world. The fact is, the history of the Mecha Sally arc is a confusing one. It's a confusing one. It's a WTF one. It's basically one that's filled with a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, as far as I know, and maybe Linkara can correct me on it, but as far as I know, not once have I ever heard of a story arc, whether it's Marvel, DC, IDW, whoever. Never once have I heard of a story arc having to edit and change or all of a sudden have a sudden ending that led into something that really had no connection whatsoever with a crossover with another character or whatever. Never once have I heard any comic arc, any major story arc in a comic ending abruptly due to behind-the-scenes issues. Maybe there have been, maybe there have been in the past, but still, it's like I have never heard of it. And I look at it this way: if I'm if I'm Archie Comics, if I'm Ian Flynn, I too would be asking myself the same question that a lot of people are asking, even to this day, 5 years later. And let me remind you guys of something. Last September would have marked 2 years since the Soft Retcon reboot began. This September is going to mark 3. And guess what? The arc didn't end until about October of last year. It's going to be 1 year this October since the arc ended of the Soft Retcon reboot, which became a result of not just the behind-the-scenes lawsuit and the Mega Man Sonic crossover, but mainly also a result of the Mecha Sally arc. That's why people like me still talk about it, because now we're going to look at a 1 year anniversary of when the follow-up arc to it, Shadow World Crisis, officially ended. And we're looking at we're currently in the 2 year anniversary, going on 3 years this September, of when the Soft Retcon reboot started. Again, history of the Mecha Sally arc is one that, even though a lot of us have the issues, I think, as I said one time in a video I did at work, this is all been tossed away into discontinuity. And when you toss something that big, that major into discontinuity, you have the question plagued: what was the point? What was the point of it happening? because you had a lot of things potentially planned to resolve it. I mean, from what I understand, they were going to have, like I said earlier, they were going to have Sally restored by 250 and then rebuild the Freedom Fighters up to about 300, where they would probably have a final battle or something like that with Eggman. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. So it's just confusing in a sense. Just really confusing. Just really confusing. And then, if you're a Sonic Sally fan, you still have faith, like I do, that whoever writes the issue, where they get back together, that they're going to do it in a more respectable way. But you also look back at the history of the Mecha Sally arc, and you're like, wait a minute. You're telling me this whole thing was just her. And again, this goes back to what I said about people being angry. It's like, so you build up the relationship, you rebuild the relationship, you rekindle that fire between the two characters, and you snuff it out after 3 to 8 issues, and then the reason you give as to why you snuffed it out, especially when you come to you start the new retcon reboot, because you don't want to deal with shipping wars. You don't want to deal with the romantic shipping wars or the shippers out there. They're just sick of it. Well, I can understand and respect the decision there, but hello, it doesn't matter what comic you would work on or what company you would be working for. If you have a romantic couple that fans want to see together, you're going to have shipping wars no matter what. You're going to have supporters no matter what. So you can't just go out and do what you did because do what you did and then explain, oh, I'm not going to put them together anymore because of this, because of that reason. No, you can't do that. You just got to deal with it. You got to work your way around it, or at least, and I'm hoping this happens, you hand it off to somebody else and say, hey, you want to put Sonic and Sally together again? Fine, go ahead, that's your problem. I don't want to deal with it. If I'm Ian Flynn, I would do that. Hopefully he has done that. But again, that's another reason. Again, the history of the Mecha Sally arc is just one of those things that when you look back at it, it's just one of so much what the blank, basically of what was the point. And I think whether you liked the issue or you hated the issue or you were down in the middle of it, I think that's the one question a lot of us have. We can all have in common. We all can come and agree upon. What was the point what was the real point? What was the point of doing this in the first place? Because you basically give the middle finger to some of the past continuity and things that have been acknowledged could not be restored, but yet you did it. You decide to add your own little tidbits here and there about certain characters that never existed in the first place, and you basically build one of the most prominent, sometimes controversial, but one of the most prominent and popular romantic couples in a comic book by Archie Comics, licensed by Archie Comics, or licensed by anybody in Sonic and Sally. You rebuild and rekindle the relationship only to snuff it out after a few more issues, only after 3 to 8 issues. Again, it's like, what was the point? What was the point of putting them together? What was the point of writing this arc? What was the point in general if you were going to do all this and basically just not have any real resolution to it? And yet, you know what makes the history of the Mecha Sally arc, one that is probably a very controversial history? It's not just a lawsuit that caused the changes and caused it to come to an abrupt end. It's not the sudden continuity changes and additions that gave the middle finger to establish continuity moments and arcs and stories. But it's the fact that the person, with all due respect, that wrote the arc has come out and said that he plans to let us know more about what was going to originally happen, and yet all he's given us is one chapter. And I can understand if he's busy, he's got personal life and stuff, I get that, he's got other work, I get that. But I'm sure in between there you can find at least a little time to give us more detail as to what was going to happen, because you know what? You're not going to do it, then what's the point of even announcing you're going to do a follow-up on your own accord? Here's the thing: what do people, what are fans supposed to do? Wait several years until what? We completely forget about the Mecha Sally arc, and you'll be like, okay, they completely forgot about it. I don't have to tell them about it. Or you're gonna wait several more years to make sure the new one is established and pretty much cemented in our minds. It's no wonder the history of the Mecha Sally arc is a controversial history, because not even the head writer, the person that came up with the idea, has followed up entirely. I mean, yes, you put out one chapter, as he puts it, but yet it's been over a year, not more. Where's the rest? You have enough time. Yeah, you have other projects. You have your personal life. Respect all that. I do. So does everybody else. But you can't tell me you can't find time to maybe add another chapter once every few months. That, in conclusion, folks, is why the history of the Mecha Sally arc is a controversial one. Because the person that came up with it, right now, is not giving us a straight answer as to what was really going to be. The only person that has so far